It was a quiet evening when Ben and his friends, Sarah and Tom, decided to visit an old farmhouse on the edge of town. It had been abandoned for years, and stories about strange happenings around the place had been passed down by the locals. Some said the house was haunted, while others whispered that something far worse was lurking in the dark corners of that farm. Ben, however, didn't believe in ghosts or monsters, and he thought the stories were just silly rumors. "It's just an old house," he said, laughing with his friends. "We'll be fine." But as they made their way down the narrow, dirt road to the farmhouse, an uneasy feeling started to settle in. The sky was turning dark, and the air felt cold, even though it was the middle of summer. Ben glanced at Sarah, who was clutching her phone tightly. Tom, on the other hand, looked excited, eager for an adventure. They reached the gate, which creaked loudly as Ben pushed it open. They stepped onto the property, the tall grass brushing against their legs as they walked toward the house. The farmhouse stood in front of them, its windows dark and its structure sagging with age. It was clear that no one had lived there for a long time. "Are you sure we should be here?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Come on, Sarah. It's just an old house," Ben said, trying to reassure her, but deep down, even he couldn't shake the strange feeling crawling up his spine. The air was thick, as if the land itself was holding its breath. They walked up the porch steps and pushed the creaky door open. It swung inward with a groan, revealing a dark hallway filled with dust and cobwebs. The musty smell of old wood and decay filled the air. Ben flicked on his flashlight, casting an eerie glow on the walls. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet as they ventured deeper into the house. "This is it," Tom said, his voice full of excitement. "The perfect spot for a little adventure." But as they moved further into the house, something started to feel off. There was an unsettling silence, like the house was waiting for something. Ben shone the light across the room, and his heart skipped a beat when he noticed a strange, flickering light coming from the back of the house. It wasn't like the light of a normal lamp or a flashlight. It was strange and pulsating, as if it were alive. The light danced and shimmered like it had a life of its own, casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Do you guys see that?" Ben asked, his voice dropping lower as he pointed toward the back of the house. Sarah gasped, her face pale. "What is that?" "It doesn't look normal." Tom squinted, his curiosity growing. "Let's go check it out." They slowly made their way toward the source of the strange light. As they approached, the air grew colder, and an odd humming sound filled the room. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate in their bones, a low buzzing that felt unnatural, like something from another world. "Ben, I don't think we should go any further," Sarah whispered, her voice shaky. But Ben, determined to figure out what was going on, ignored her and stepped forward. He pushed open the door at the end of the hall, revealing a room unlike any other. It was small and cramped, with strange markings on the walls. The light they had seen earlier was coming from a strange, glowing object sitting on the floor. It looked like a small device, no bigger than a football, but it was pulsing with light, sending waves of energy through the air. "What is that thing?" Tom asked, his voice full of wonder. "It looks like something from a sci-fi movie." Ben took a step closer, feeling an odd pull toward the object. As he reached out to touch it, the light suddenly flared brightly, blinding him for a moment. He stumbled back, his heart racing. The humming sound grew louder, and the temperature in the room dropped even more. It felt like something was about to happen, something big. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the floor above. The three of them froze, their eyes wide with fear. The noise came again, followed by the sound of someone moving across the floor upstairs. But no one had been in the house when they arrived. They had checked. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Ben nodded, his stomach tightening. "We need to get out of here." Just as they turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside. The glowing object on the floor flickered, and the humming sound grew louder, almost deafening. The walls seemed to tremble, and the room seemed to pulse with an energy they couldn't understand. "Ben, what's happening?" Tom shouted, his face pale with fear. Ben could barely speak. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was going on. There was something in the house, something they hadn't anticipated, and it was far worse than they could have imagined. Suddenly, The floor began to shake, and a low rumble filled the air. The walls cracked, and strange symbols began to appear on the floor. Ben felt a pressure in his chest as if something was pushing against him. He glanced at the others, and their faces were filled with terror. "Get to the door, now!" Ben shouted, and they all rushed toward the entrance. But before they could reach it, the door flew open on its own, revealing a figure standing in the doorway. It was tall, much taller than any human, and its skin was a strange shade of gray. Its eyes were large and black, reflecting the flickering light of the glowing object. It moved silently, its body unnaturally still. Ben's heart raced in his chest as he stared at the creature. "What is that?" Sarah whispered, barely able to form the words. The creature didn't speak. It simply reached out with long, thin fingers and pointed toward the glowing object on the floor. The room grew colder still, and the light from the object intensified, casting strange shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Ben's mind was in a haze. His thoughts jumbled as the creature slowly moved closer. He wanted to run, to escape, but his body refused to obey. It was as if the house had taken control of him. The creature's gaze locked with his, and for a moment, everything went silent. Then, the creature's voice filled his head, low and alien, a sound that made his skin crawl. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice said, its words chilling Ben to the core. "This place is not meant for you." The air seemed to grow heavier, and the temperature plummeted. The creature's presence filled the room, its power overwhelming. It was as if the house, the farm, the very land itself was alive, and it was hungry. Ben and his friends were frozen in place, unable to move as the creature slowly advanced toward them. The glowing object pulsed faster, its light now blinding, and the humming sound became a shriek in their ears. And then, just as suddenly as it had all begun, the lights flickered one last time, and everything went dark. What do you think happened to Ben and his friends? Could they have escaped? Or did the house claim them forever? Was the creature from another world, or something far darker? If you want to know what happens next, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for more terrifying tales that will send chills down your spine.